And the first thing we're going to do is call our color guard from Boy Scout Troop 351, San Marino, in. Since this is a patriotic military history type program, and we're at a institution here which used to be Southwestern Military Academy, I think it's very appropriate for our Boy Scouts to open up with the presentation of the colors.
Those in uniform, salute. Those not, place your right hand over your heart and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Color guards dismissed.
Thank you, color guard. They normally carry the flag in, but this flag is permanently affixed to the wall. I'm going to open this meeting by asking our president, Marilyn Peck, president of the San Marino Historical Society, to make the opening remark.
Good evening. As you know, I'm Marilyn Peck, and I'm president of the Historical Society. I want to welcome you to a very, very special program. I have just a few brief announcements, and then we'll have our program. You'll notice we have some wonderful original watercolors of World War II aircraft around the room. They've been painted by aviation artist David Darbyshire, who is here tonight. David, where are you? Would you stand, please? That's David. Thank you. I invited David to come and display and sell his paintings if he wishes to. I've asked David to paint a B-26 as a surprise for my husband, and it's on display here tonight, but that one's not for sale. Have a look at his paintings after the program, please. We're still selling our Map of San Marino sweatshirts and totes, and they're in the back, and they make wonderful gifts, and that's our fundraiser. Also, there are flyers of our future programs, our membership envelopes, our latest newsletters, and you're free to take them when you leave, please. Finally, I'd like to tell you that I just learned that 1997 is the 50th anniversary of the Air Force as a separate service. And I had to get that one in for my husband and for my father, who are Air Force vets. And I'd like to thank Ken Baranda for being our host tonight at Southwestern Academy. And I'd like to introduce our program chairman, Paul Crowley. Paul?
Can you all hear okay? Is this mic working well? Yes. Oh. No? It's not working? All right, now it's working. Okay, this program is not our normal format. We have never attempted a six-man panel before. There are all kinds of hazards here that we're facing, but we think we can get through it because we have such distinguished men up here on the stage. The first thing you should know is that the title, the way we got here was last year Ken Baranda, our host, gave us a lecture on World War II here in San Marino, how it affected this city with the vegetable gardens, victory gardens, and the ration stamps, and the anti-aircraft guns in Lacey Park, and General Patton, who had interviewed Ken Baranda in depth. Although Ken was only 4 years old, he repeats every word of it. We heard all that, and it gave us an idea, and the idea came from Jim Elliott, who's going to be up here in a second. Jim Elliott, one of our board members, said, hey, we ought to try to preserve some of the memories of what some of our residents that are here now did over there on both sides of the world in World War II. And we thought that was a good idea, and so we went forward with it. We picked 6 individuals that I happen to know, and I've insulted at least 200 others that did other things that I did not ask here, so I've heard all about that. The title is an interesting title. Ken Veranda selected the title, Before the Colors Fade. There's no implication there, really, except that he got the idea at Rotary one time. We had a doctor lecture to us last year on Alzheimer's disease. It was a great lecture. But 3 weeks later, Ken was sitting at the table, and 6 of the 8 people couldn't remember the lecture. That's where we got the title. So, but Jim Elliott, I'm going to ask to come up here now and just say a word, because Jim is the fellow that really triggered this, and he's a historian, and I think his idea was great, and all the rest of us did was try to implement it. Jim?
Thanks, Paul. My name is Jim Elliott, and I'm just as proud as I can be here tonight to see all of you here, many of whom I know, and those I don't know, I suspect I have an idea what they went through to arrive here at this point in time. I want to thank Mrs. Marilyn Peck and Sandy, her husband, for their help, and also the other members, Kirk Helm and others of the Historical Society that helped get this together. Of course, without Paul Crowley, it couldn't have been done. Like he says, he knows most of these people intimately. Fortunately for me, there are some people in the audience that I know intimately. So in the 2 minutes that I have, I'm going to remind you what it was like to be here prior and at the beginning of World War II. I was a child of 9 years old at that time, and we were living in Ohio, and the games we played had nothing to do with war. After all, the country had already been through one war, and it's my opinion that we weren't anxious to get into another one. It was very difficult in those days because of the Depression, but we got along fine by using orange crates for bookshelves, or playing tent with a blanket that was strung over a clothesline between 2 trees. But then on December 7th, 1941, all that changed. We heard at a friend of ours' house in Atwater, Ohio, that Pearl Harbor had been attacked. The President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, came on the air, and you had to listen carefully, but he said, "Today is a day that will live in infamy." Because all the time that we were figuring that we were going to be at peace, the Japanese had already launched an attack against our Navy, which nearly totally destroyed our Navy. So we had no protection here on the West Coast whatsoever at that time. And we were really in danger. And I still have a dog tag that they gave me that they gave to all the school children here at Altadena Elementary School. It's a dog tag with your name, address, and phone number on it, in case that you got killed. So this was a serious business. On Monday morning, that was a Sunday night where we were at, on Monday morning there wasn't a man on the street here. They were all down at the induction service, trying to sign up to go and fight, particularly in this case of California, the Japanese. Now, the main reason that I'm up here is so that these men that put themselves and their lives at stake in order to maintain our freedom, so we can stand up here and salute this flag. These men are here, the ones that are left, but there's a lot of them that aren't here that are talking to us tonight through me and through these 6 men. So I ask you please to listen carefully so that history is not distorted by time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. I might add that on that day in December 1941, well, I won't quote that day. Later, during the war, when it was about to end, a lot of us here, myself included, were at South Pass San Marino High School, and I can remember that the one thing we didn't want to have happen was the war to end, because we wouldn't get in it. And we were pulling for somebody to keep fighting until we got graduated. And that shows you the kids weren't any smarter then than they are now. I'm going to take about 3 minutes to do a very quick synopsis of how this war got started, mostly for the benefit of some younger people I see here, and maybe for the real older ones that have forgotten how it got started. But we have a map on the wall. The map is obviously of Europe. And in September 1st, 1939, Germany, under the control of the Nazi Party, Adolf Hitler, they had already acquired Austria and Czechoslovakia through diplomatic means, if you want to call it that. The Germans on September 1st attacked Poland. Poland, however, had an alliance with Great Britain and France. That triggered Britain and France to declare war on Germany, and then Italy declared war on France, and everything started. Within the next 2 years, the Germans had overcome almost all of Europe. They had invaded and conquered Denmark, Norway, Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, France, which was unbelievable at the time. They had conquered Yugoslavia and Greece. They had occupied Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria in the Balkans, not by force, but very close to it. And Finland had even come onto their side, and the 3 Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, were also under their control because they had invaded Russia, and Germany had gotten all the way to Moscow, 20 miles from Moscow, by December of 1941. So we had a situation where Germany controlled all of Europe except England, and all of North Africa, all the way to almost to the Suez Canal, to Alexandria. A very difficult situation. The United States was neutral. Although we were supporting Great Britain, we were neutral, and the Americans didn't want to get into the war. Then, and Jim, maybe you could change the slide. There are only going to be 2 slides, so this will be easy.
Oh, good.
Drop it a little.
Oh, good. No, you can't see it.
That's good, right there. On these, the Japanese had, in the meantime, independently on the other side of the world, been trying to conquer China for the last 10 years. And they had occupied a great deal of China. They had grabbed French Indochina when the French collapsed in Europe. And they were very aggressively looking at all of the islands and countries in the Far East. Our President Roosevelt was trying to stop them by a blockade of, or an economic blockade of oil, an embargo. So our relationships with Japan were very poor. But we didn't think they were as poor as they were, because on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese brought their navy, a big part of it, to within 300 miles of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and attacked our fleet at 8 o'clock in the morning and destroyed a great part of our Pacific fleet. And within the next 6 months, they also took over the Philippines, which belonged to us, Hong Kong, the Dutch East Indies, they threatened Australia, they took over Siam, which is now Thailand, and they even took Singapore, the largest British naval base in the world, which Winston Churchill always said was his darkest hour. He never believed that Singapore could fall. To make matters worse, 4 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, to the surprise of everyone in the world, Germany declared war on us. Hitler did that on his own, to the consternation of his own general staff, and it probably lost the war for Germany. It was a poor move by Germany, but it was also one that we weren't very excited about because the hysteria in this country was against the Japanese. Now that's all I'm going to say about the prelude to the war. These 6 individuals up here were all living somewhere else at the time. They all live in San Marino now, but they were somewhere else, and it's going to be interesting to hear what each of them did after that attack on Pearl Harbor, what got them to where they finally wound up. And I think we'll start with Bill Steele. Bill Steele is almost a native. He was born in Sacramento, went to Fullerton High School, grew up down there, went to SC ultimately, and he was riding with a friend on that Sunday, going from Yorba Linda to Fullerton with a friend in the car, and they heard it on the radio. And Bill Steele was at Fullerton High School at that time. This was December 7th, 1941. So that's what Bill was doing, and I'm going to ask Bill to come up to the mic and tell us what happened after that.
Thanks, Paul. Well, there was a lot happened, of course, after December 7, 1941 to me, but being in high school, none of it was very important. Of course, I thought some of those things were pretty important. Paul, when he asked me to talk, I'm going to put these glasses down here. When Paul asked me to talk, he said that he wasn't too specific. He said, talk about bomb runs over Tokyo. I had made a mistake a few years ago and told Paul a couple of stories that I dearly love, and he remembers. He's got a memory, you know, like an elephant, and he remembers all the details. So anyhow, he asked me to speak about bomb runs over Tokyo and anything else that I might want to throw in, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'll try to limit my discussion mostly to that part of my military career. I flew 35 missions to Japan from Saipan. Now, Ken said Saipan wasn't on the map, but I like to catch him in a mistake every once in a while, and it's right there. I flew 35 times from there back and forth. I joined the Army Air Corps so I could fly over land and walk home if I ever was in trouble, and I flew 35 missions over water. But that's ahead of my story. I enlisted in the Army Air Corps at age 18 in 1942. I had just gotten out of high school, and I took the usual kind of training. I had always wanted to fly, and I'd always wanted to go in the Army Air Corps as cadets, and so I knew what I wanted to get into, and it worked for me. And I went through the usual training and graduated from advanced flying training as a second lieutenant pilot at the tender age of 19 from Pecos, Texas. I was assigned to B-17 First Pilot Transition School in Roswell, New Mexico. And while I was in Roswell, New Mexico, I heard about this fantastic new airplane that had a pressurized cabin. They didn't have to wear these big, bulky sheepskin lined suits and so forth. And it carried 20,000 pounds of bombs, which was twice as much as anything else carried. And they had remote controlled, actually computerized guns on this B-29. And it flew higher and faster than anything else in the world in the heavy bomber category. And I just had to get into it. And for once in my life, in my military career, I had an opportunity to kind of govern my destiny, and I stepped in and did that, and I got assigned in the B-29s as a co-pilot with a combat training crew in Clovis, New Mexico. I went to Clovis, New Mexico, was assigned, as I say, a co-pilot under Lieutenant Harvey Swenson, and our crew finished Clovis, did the usual thing, went up to Kearney, Nebraska, picked up a brand new B-29, and flew it to Saipan. We flew by way of Sacramento to, how's this thing work? To Hawaii, and then we flew to Kwajalein, and then we flew to Tinian. And we were the first combat crew, replacement crew, that ever had arrived at Tinian, and they didn't need us. They weren't flying missions yet, so we sat there. It was kind of the Army type thing, you know, what do you do now? So they decided to send us to Saipan, which is just 3 miles across the bay there, and Saipan needed replacement crews, so that's where we went. When we got there, they broke our crew up, much to our consternation and sadness, and Harvey Swenson was taken out of our crew and our navigator, and we got a fellow that was an old geezer. He was 30 years old, and he was going to be our airplane commander. I flew one mission with Lamb. His name was Lambach, Charles Lambach, and he's the only pilot that I ever flew with that I didn't think I was better than. And, you know, when you're 19, you're always better than anybody else. And I didn't feel that way about Lamb. We got to check each other out once, a little training mission. We flew around the islands there, and then we went off to our first mission on January the 19th, 1945, and we bombed the Kawasaki aircraft engine plant in Akashi. The 73rd Wing of the 20th Air Force that I was in did not have a very good record up to that point. I like to think it was because I arrived, but it had nothing to do with it. They destroyed 29% of that plant. And that's what our photos showed. After the war was over, it was determined that we destroyed 90% of that plant, and they moved it to a hidden location someplace else. I'm going to kind of give a little synopsis or highlights of some missions that I thought you might be interested in hearing about. My 8th mission was the first fire mission on Japan, and that was really the beginning of the end of the Japanese Empire, in my opinion. General Curtis LeMay, who was in charge of the 20th Air Force and actually reported directly to Hap Arnold in Washington, D.C. in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, decided that our results were not very good, high altitude formation flying. He decided that he was going to send us in flying singly, and at night, instead of 20 and 30,000 feet, we were going in at 6,000 feet, and you can imagine how we all felt about that. They said, there's old blood and guts LeMay, you know, his guts and our blood. And you've all heard that before, but that was our attitude, and we went to Tokyo. It was a very successful mission. We had intense flak, we had great results, and we didn't lose one B-29 in the whole thing, and we destroyed 16.2 square miles of Tokyo, and that was really the success of what we were doing to bring that war to an end. And it sounds pretty terrible and tragic now, but the Japanese had lots of home industry, and everything was mixed together, and it was all pretty flammable. The 9th mission was another fire mission. Didn't go quite that well for us. Our target was Nagoya. We lost our fuel transfer system en route to the target, and over the target our number 3 engine was shot out. Well, that's kind of a problem for you because you don't get by with less gasoline with 3 engines. It uses a lot more gasoline than 4 engines. And we knew at that point that we would never get back to Saipan, but fortunately for us, the United States Marines were invading and had invaded and were fighting at that time for Iwo Jima. And Iwo Jima was halfway. Iwo Jima became our destination at that point, and our flight engineer said that it was going to be close, but he thought we could make it. So that's where we headed, and we were going that direction. And when the flight engineer came on and said, you know, we're in pretty bad shape gasoline-wise, I think we got about 50 miles left, our navigator gave us a fix 300 miles north of Iwo. We didn't feel very good. Well, he was from Virginia, and he wasn't the best navigator, but he was the best guy in the world. And he came in a moment, and he says, you know, we're only 50 miles north of Iwo. And just about that time, Iwo showed up, and we got a clearance to land on a Japanese airstrip on the southern end of Iwo Jima, right under Mount Suribachi. We didn't feel we had enough fuel to go around. We had to make that first landing and make it right. Lamb set the gear down on the edge of the runway, and we both jumped on the brakes with the throttles cut, and it came to a halt at the edge of a cliff overlooking the water, and there was a B-29 right down there on the rocks that hadn't maybe hit the right place on the strip. But we did, and we taxied back, and I spent 4 days with the United States Marine Corps, and I'll tell you, those guys deserve all the credit that they got, because they lived like dogs there on that volcanic island, and they really had to fight, and they did it, and it provided a place for me. Saipan flew us an engine, and we changed it ourselves with the help of a ground crew member that came along, and we were ready to go one night, 4 nights later, and we took a vote. We were a very democratic crew, and we decided to fly out at night, although no one had flown from there before at night. So we went down, got on that same edge of the runway, brakes held full, engines going full blast, released the brakes, and we were airborne right at the end of the runway. My 12th mission was really the most exciting mission that I had as far as Japanese action was concerned. There was an old target there. I remember the number well because it threw terror into the hearts of all airmen at that time. It was target 357, which is just outside of Tokyo, and it was the Mushishino Aircraft Engine Factory in Tokyo. They defended it fiercely, and we never did a real good job of hitting that target. But that mission was, I'll never forget the date, it was April 7, 1945. We rendezvoused off of the coast of Japan on a rock. It was a rock out there in the middle of the ocean, and these navigators found it, and we circled, and we got our formation together, and we flew in, and we were in good formation by the time we made landfall. This is one of the stories that I told Paul that he still remembers. I was a co-pilot, and a co-pilot going into the target had the best seat in the house because you could see everything, and you were not responsible for flying that plane up close to the lead aircraft, so you got to watch what was happening and call fighters and so forth. And so I was watching a Japanese fighter, and he was a Nick, they called him. He was a twin-engine fighter, and I think I got the name right, and he was out in front of us, and he was doing these evasive kind of slow-down type maneuvers because he was faster than we are. We only flew at 195 indicated airspeed going into a target. And so he was radioing in our altitude and heading and airspeed so that the gunners and the fighter planes would know where we were headed. Well, this was also supposed to be the first P-51 escort for the B-29s bombing Japan, and those P-51s, and I think there's one over there I see a picture of, were on Iwo Jima. We hadn't seen them, although we were told that they were going to be there. And I'm watching this guy out there, you know, doing his radio thing, just kind of dancing around. And I look up, and here comes two gorgeous P-51 Mustangs in a dive. And they pulled down under him and up, and each gave him a blast. He burst into flames. The guy bailed out. He had pulled up a little higher than our formations. And he made his second mistake of the day as he went out. He pulled his ripcord immediately. So here he is, floating in this parachute, and here comes these B-29s at the same altitude. He was off maybe 300, 400, 500 yards to the left of us by the time we got there. And the last I saw him, he was hanging in his harness, and there was a little tracer going out every once in a while just to catch his attention, I think. I don't think they were really aiming at him. We had heavy flak going in to the target, and one of our 29s off our left wing was hit in the direct hit in the wing, lost its wing, went into a tight spin. I don't think anyone got out of it. And there were a lot of things happening. We dropped the bombs, and as we were getting away from the target, here come the fighters. It was the heaviest fighter action that I had participated in or witnessed, and our crew, this is one crew, had a score of 5 enemy aircraft destroyed and 4 probably destroyed. One of the memorable attacks that I remember was a ramming when the Japanese fighters did ram B-29s when they felt there was no other way to get them or something, but there was one coming down on us from above with all guns blazing, and he was headed right for us, and my bombardier, Charles S. Shinkowski, was in the nose, and he turns this radar, or this remote control gun sight around on this guy, and is firing 4 50 caliber machine guns from one turret in front. They make a terrible noise, and just as this plane was getting close, he exploded, and fortunately for us, Chuck had a direct hit. One other thing I remember was seeing a fighter coming straight at us, and they have these little lights blinking on their wings. Well, those little lights, you all know, those are machine guns, and he didn't get any of us, and he pulled up, and we had told our 19-year-old tail gunner, who was a few months younger than I was, so he was called Junior. They pulled up and went over, and Junior replied, "Got him." Our right gunner and our radio operator were wounded by fighter gunfire in that mission. The radio operator not badly. He had moved from his radio position to an observer position. Fortunately for him, because when he got back to his position, it was full of holes. But he was okay. We had so much fighter action on that one that we ran out of ammunition. Before we reached the coastline, we snuggled up real close to the lead craft. We found out later he was out of ammunition too. My 16th mission was a tactical support of the United States Navy. We were strategic bombers, and the Navy was helping the invasion of Okinawa, and the kamikaze pilots were flying off of Kyushu, the southernmost island of Japan. So they pulled us off strategic. We're going to be tactical bombers, and we're going to bomb the airfields of southern Japan on the home island of Kyushu. It was kind of a routine mission. Part of it, the routine, was we had bad weather, which we had a lot of the time. We got there, we couldn't find our rendezvous point visually, so we weren't going to fly in formation. We flew in singly to the target area. It was socked in, so we chose our secondary target, which happened to be USA. That's where the Japanese stamped "Made in USA," USA. And we went into the airfield there, bombed by radar, and just as we went out, we flew over a hole in the undercast. And Lamb says, "You want to go down and take some pictures?" And I said, "Sure." So we made a turn, and I got the radar operator to hook up the camera, which is in the bottom of the tail area, and we made 2 straight passes over this airfield at low altitude for a B-29, and the gunners were firing all the time that we were near the airfield, and we were the only B-29 crew that ever got official credit for destroying 2 Betty bombers on the ground with machine gun fire. And we were written up in Air Force Magazine of August 1945 for that. That was about the only mission. And I had one other mission that was quite exciting for me. I won't go into the details. I'm probably taking too much time, but that was my 19th mission. And we ditched in the ocean on the way home from that. And it worked out fine, although it was a little exciting. And we were the first B-29 crew that I know of where all 11 members survived the ditching. I'm going to conclude by talking about the atomic bomb. All of you know that on, August 6th and August 9th, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed by the atomic bomb, and a lot of people think that was the end of the war. But on the 14th of August, 1945, the largest B-29 raid in history occurred. 1,000 B-29s went over Japan. I think it might have been a little less than 1,000, but that was the last mission of the war. And on the way home from that mission, I heard over the radio Harry Truman saying that the war was over. That was my 35th mission, which was the end of a tour of duty for me, and coincidentally was the end of the war. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. He left out one little anecdote. He told me that he heard Doris Day singing Sentimental Journey on one of his flights, and it was the happiest thing he ever heard on the radio. Is that true? And also, Bill and I have introduced each other at so many functions. I give him an advance in rank every time. I think you were full colonel last time I introduced you, but I keep... It's really a first lieutenant. Well, anyway, I keep promoting Bill. So that we can keep the same slide on the screen, I'll go to the next speaker, who is another Pacific War veteran, John Holmstrom, who was born in Los Angeles, went to Whittier High, and ultimately to Stanford and SC. And he was home from college visiting his parents in Los Angeles on that December 7th. A college student, as most of them seem to have been, and they got the news, and I'll let John Holmstrom take it from here.
Thank you very much, Paul. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to represent the Navy, and specifically I was a fighter pilot. I flew an F-4U Corsair off carriers, specifically the USS Intrepid. I attended my first training base in January of 1943. It was up at Lone Pine, and they sent me up there, the Navy did, for civilian air patrol. And we just flew small little airplanes for a couple of months, and then I came back. The next base I went to was pre-flight. The Navy had taken over the old, not old, I don't know how old it was, Del Monte Hotel up out of Monterey. And so we had some pretty nice quarters up there. However, there were 8 of us in a room with red carpeting and a vacuum. And there couldn't be a speck on the floor at any time, and most of the time there was gym clothes and stuff that had a lot of cotton in it that dropped on the floor and very hard to clean. It was all athletics, football, boxing, wrestling, had a lot of all-American instructors there, and it was pretty good for about 3 months. But I went to Livermore, where we flew and had Navy and Marine instructors, and flew the Stearman type biplanes and some single-wing planes, did a lot of acrobatics and landing in small fields and so on. Next I went to Corpus Christi, was there about 6 months. I think the total training was about 18 months. And I graduated as an ensign with fighter pilot training. I next went to Vero Beach, where the Dodgers are now. That was the Navy Air Station. And I was there about 3 months flying F-6Fs, the Hellcat, and the F-4U, the Corsair. I eventually ended up at Atlantic City, which was kind of the pool for forming air groups. On September 15th of 1944, I joined the Air Group 10. Air Group 10 had been in and out quite a few times in the war in the Pacific on different carriers, and so this was their, I think, the 4th Air Group 10, called the Grim Reapers. We trained in Atlantic City, but it wasn't cold enough there, so in January we went up to Connecticut, Groton, and we even flew up to Maine. I could never figure out what we were doing there in this ice cold weather when we were going out in the Pacific. But at the end of January, we got word that we were going to fly to Alameda, California, and fly our planes, and we're going to board the USS Intrepid. We had a very good group at that time, consisted of 4 squadrons. One fighter squadron, 1 fighter bomber. They split an 80-man fighter squadron into 2 squadrons because the F-4U could carry tremendous weights for a fighter plane. I mean, we normally had a 500-pound bomb, 8 50 caliber machine guns, 4 in each wing, and about 6 4-inch rockets. At times, we would carry a new rocket called the Tiny Tim. It was about 15 feet long and about 10, 11 inches in diameter, and had a big warhead on it of some kind. But when you fired that, well, you really lifted you up in the air, I'll tell you. The fighter bombers and fighters, we also had the dive bomber, but because the war had changed and there were so few left of the Japanese fleet. In fact, there was the Yamato and another battleship and about 4 cruisers and about 10 destroyers. Those all was left, and they were in near Kyushu in the inland ocean. Never came out because also they were out of fuel, and so they didn't sail their big ships very often. We got on the Intrepid probably in February 18th, I think it was. And we sailed first to Pearl, we're there a few days, and then we headed for Ulithi. Ulithi was about 4,000 miles. Here's somebody look that.
Right there on
Here. Okay. In the Western Carolines, where's the Western? There's Carolina. The Western Carolines, where Ulithi was. There's the Carolines, but then let's see Ulithi. It was right in here somewhere. And it was kind of the meeting place for the Pacific fleet. And when we got there, I was just amazed in awe at the number of ships and the sizes and the different types. Mark Mixner was going to be the Vice Admiral of our Task Force 58, which we joined. There were 2 carriers in it, the Intrepid, and it changed. Whoever got hit by a kamikaze would leave, and another carrier would show up. Mixner had at his disposal 11 large carriers, 6 jeep carriers, 7 battleships, 24 cruisers, and 64 destroyers. They weren't all in one task group, but and we were in the fast attack carrier group. So we were in Ulithi for a couple of days, and just before we arrived, the USS Randolph, a carrier, got hit by a kamikaze. They think it came at night from Yap, which wasn't too far away. So we took off one night and full speed, and we learned we were heading straight for Japan. And we arrived there on towards the end of February at the spot about 90 miles south of this Japan, our task force group 58, and had our first strike on sounded like the same place Mr. Steele did in the Kyushu area, we had a Air Force, either a Navy or Air Force base, and we had at that time 70 planes that took off, and I was one of them. And we then continued the rest of the day with other fighters for the carrier that was with us, and our carrier made trips to Japan. For the next few days, we hit Japan, and I'll tell you a little about task force and how they operate. First of all, the two carriers are in the center of the task group. A battleship or two are behind, and the admiral rides in one of the battleships. Then there's 4 or 5 cruisers around that, and then there's 20 to 30 destroyers that are on the perimeter, and they're called picket ships. And they're to keep the kamikazes away from us because they're all coming after the carriers. At that time, the kamikazes were rampant. It was the toughest thing that we had to fight. The Zeros had pretty well been knocked out of the sky by the people that had fought before me. So we still had some of their hot chap pilots come down every once in a while flying a plane called the Jack and a few others, but they were usually escorting a kamikaze. The kamikaze generally was in any type of airplane that could fly, and there were these young volunteers that would get in them, and if they didn't know how to navigate, well, the plane would escort them as close as they could to the task force, and then they'd make a one-way trip trying to hit one of our ships. We were also starting to hit Okinawa, because that was going to be the big base for the United States when they were going to try to invade Japan, which would be as soon as we took Okinawa. So we pounded Okinawa for days, and it's the first and probably last time you'll see 6 battleships in a row, all firing at this big hill on the western side of Okinawa, where we knew that we were going to invade it from the other side, but it was just, it was filled with concrete pillar boxes and everything else, so they were just trying to get rid of them, I guess. On April the 1st, the invasion started, and it started from the east side and was composed of about 180,000 troops. There were 4 Army divisions and 3 Marine divisions. And I flew with one of the first groups that sprayed the beaches with our bombs and machine gun, leading the landing craft into the shore of the beaches. All right. They started at 8:30, and by 10:30 they had 50,000 troops on the beaches. And we continued. They had 3 airports, and we continued back and forth from the carrier that day, bombing the airports so they couldn't use them, and because they had kamikazes on these airports, and they could have flown off and hit the carriers. This was, I was getting around to tell you about the carrier task force group. Told you about the 2 aircraft carriers. Whenever we took off or landed, the whole group had to turn into the wind. So they like to do that as fast a time as possible, because you were vulnerable to the enemy at that time too, and the kamikazes. So when we came in for a landing, we would try to get a plane on the deck of both those carriers every 15 seconds, which was difficult to do. However, the admiral would chew out the captains, I think, every time something happened, because it's not too easy to land on a carrier. First of all, you're coming on a moving platform that's going up and down at least 15 feet. The deck is, especially on the stern. And you have a man that's waving you in and telling you whether you're too high, or you're not level, or you're too low, or you're not fast enough. He can tell if you're kind of mushing. You tried to come in about 90 knots with your flaps down, your wheels down, and your tail hook down. If you didn't have that, he'd wave you off, and you just have to go around again. Then when you hit, or when he gave you the cut, he'd go like that, and you had to pull your throttle back and pull your stick clear back because you wanted the tail end to hit and grab a cable. If it didn't, well, you'd probably bounce, and then they had a barrier about 300 feet down the deck that was cables that you'd run into. Some planes hopped over it, and they had the parked planes on the bow of the ship because there they had two elevators. And you fold your wings, and the elevators will then take you down to the hangar deck where they get the planes off the carrier deck. So we had a lot of problems sometimes on landing, especially if somebody hit that barrier fence that was there, or caught a hook, and some of them would bounce on the side, some of them would land on one wheel, and that would be a real problem. Some of them would, the deck had gone down so far in the water, the fall was so great that they buckle their landing gear. Those things happen once in a while. But that was then the task force was turned back into whatever their course was at the time after they had landed their planes or after they had launched their planes. We didn't do too much night fighting, but we did have night fighters, probably 5 of them on the carrier, and they had radar. The only ships or planes that had radar. And they would fly out and be vectored out because the ship had radar. They vectored out to any bogies that were seen by our radar, and so you knew they were out protecting the ship at night, so you could sleep pretty well. But the carriers, there were more than the 2 of us, the Franklin and the Intrepid, because they were doing other work in the area too, but not specifically on Okinawa. The kamikazes, they would fly down in any plane that, as I said, would fly, and they depleted that group so heavily that they started manufacturing I called it an airplane bomb. It was a warhead. There's a picture of it on some of those white boards over there. And there was a warhead on it, a small wing, and a pilot's seat, and then a kind of a rocket engine on the back. But he couldn't go anywhere. He was carried by a Betty to the target area with a pilot in the Betty. When they got to the target area, they would lift the bomb door. He would get in the seat. They would get him directed correctly, and then they would release him. And it was up to him to glide in with a little use of whatever rocket power he had and hit his target. And sometimes 5 in a row would attack one carrier. And our gunners on all those ships were pretty good and did a lot of target practice. And so normally they would knock down most of them. But on October the 11th, when I was coming back from, not October the 11th, on April the 11th, 1945, I was coming back from a mission, and by that time I had my own division of 4 planes. I went in the water, and the next thing I knew, I was about 20 feet down. I was 20 feet down in the water, looking up at the surface, and I was in the front half of the plane. The plane had broken in 2. So I saw a tear, and I squeezed through it and pushed out and started rising to the surface. And when I got on the surface, I saw the Missouri about 1,000 yards behind me, but I also saw a destroyer coming my way. And before I knew it, the destroyer was alongside, and he had a great big net that he flew over, and it reached down to the water. And after a few tries, I climbed up to the deck, and they had me lay down, and they cut my white suit off of me and my parachute, and then they examined my face, and they put a bottle of liquor on the deck, and the doctor said, have a couple of swigs. Well, I didn't feel like it right then. So I said, no thanks, so then he started sewing my face up. I thought I was pretty lucky being out on a destroyer, and I got my own cabin with another officer, till I learned it was a picket ship. And so we headed out on the perimeter, and for 4 nights and 4 days, they were firing everything they had. We never got hit. But I was so happy when on the 5th day when I got back to my carrier and they put me on a bosun's chair and they put you across on a rope to the carrier. And for that they got 5 gallons of ice cream. The next day I was on the deck because they didn't want me to fly for about a week. And I noticed there was quite a bit of activity from other ships firing, and then all of a sudden our carriers started firing. Their 5-inch guns and then a 40 millimeter. I looked up and I saw what looks like specks coming at us. It turned out there were 5 different planes, and they weren't all kamikaze. Some of them were just planes that were coming after us. And 2 they got, and the bombs dropped about 100, 200 yards off the ship. But the last one got us, and right in hit our deck. I had dived into the ready room. The ready rooms for each pilot squadron were right underneath the deck of the carrier. And then there were ladders, stairways really, ladders that went down to the hangar deck where they stored planes and so on. When they went right through the flight deck, it opened up about an 80-foot diameter hole, went down into the hangar deck, but it didn't go through. It's about 15 inches of steel deck, but it blew up down there and just damaged all the airplanes, damaged the elevator, and we were looked like in bad shape for a while, but before you knew it, the firefighters were just marvelous. They went down in ropes through the smoking hole with hoses, and pretty soon they had the fires out. 28 were killed and about 50 injured. The worst kamikaze damage I saw, and a picture of it is there with a carrier that was the Franklin, that was 1,000 yards off, and this happened earlier in my tour over there. And it took a kamikaze, and it was, I think, 2 kamikazes, and it lost 725 people on that ship, and you can see it over there. But its engine chief would not leave his post, and I was talking to someone here that told me it went clear into Pearl Harbor. Where we took another route, we went to Ulithi first, back to Ulithi because there was a repair ship there, and they thought they could fix us up, but they determined they didn't know how to work on an elevator. And that was very important because that's the thing that carried the planes from the hangar deck up to the flight deck, off the flight deck back to the hangar deck, and got them off. Because we could fold our wings, so we could get pretty small, and they could pack a bunch of us at the bow end of the ship. We then left Ulithi and headed for Pearl and then San Francisco. And I had one of the thrills of my life going from Pearl to San Francisco. We didn't have any ship's duties, but we were given some on that leg of the journey. And I got one that was in the steering room on the top of the island at midnight, and I got to take the steering wheel. We're making an S-turn all the way from Pearl to San Francisco because we were not escorted by any destroyers. And I got to spin the wheel this way and catch it. We go like this, bend the whole carrier, spin it the other way. Now you have to remember, a carrier is 1,000 feet long, holds 3,000 personnel and 120 airplanes. So it's a pretty huge thing to swing around like that. But anyway, for 15 minutes I got to do that. Anyway, we came into San Francisco, and we got 2 weeks vacation, and the carrier went, the USS Intrepid went into Hunters Point to be fixed. None of us knew how long. So after our vacation, we went down, if you can believe this, to Palm Springs, all 40 of the Corsairs, and we trained over at 29 Palms on rockets and this new Tiny Tim. And we'd come home at night and would kind of see what we could scare up. We'd get abreast, 40 planes.